We're on.
We are live.
We are live. Welcome to Dead Air Live. Thank you for joining us to help us begin to celebrate Father's Day that's coming up. I'm going to have about an hour to share with us why it's never too late to have a more loving Father. And just for you joining us, people in the audience and people who are watching on this video, it helps even you being here for me to begin to feel more loving to my father, who I've invited to join us here. He died in 1996 of pancreatic cancer, but I can feel his presence. And I hope if you, whether living or dead, you can feel your presence, the presence of your father. I, see if this will work, was walking with my father near the Brooklyn Bridge where he was born. And I was in my 50s. And I said to him, could we visit where you grew up? You grew up right near here. And my dad is very obliging. And we get in the car and drive to the candy store where he grew up in Brooklyn. It's on Court Street. And I remember as a child when my father would take me there, and it was a poor little home and store. But for me, it's paradise. It had comic books. I could go in, and there was like a whole rack of comic books, and I could read while visiting my grandmother and grandfather. And so I had great affection for this paradise in Brooklyn. For my father, it's painful. There was just 2 rooms behind the store. His father worked 7 hours a day, maybe 14 hours, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, selling penny candies, comic books, newspapers. And Dad, you didn't want to go in. So we go back to Brooklyn Bridge, walking by the East River. And my father says to me, Michael, this is such a gift, Dad, that you tell me. Michael, I think I know why you've been so stubborn your whole life. And I say, why, Dad? And he says, when you were born, your mom and I read from the child rearing experts at the time, Dr. Watson, who believed in training children like Pavlov trained dogs. And Dr. Watson said, don't spoil your child. Don't let your child's crying make him think that he can control the family. Feed your child at the end of every 4th hour. And so, Michael, at the end, we didn't feed you until the end of the 4th hour. And then it was time to feed you. And you, perhaps because you didn't like the schedule, refused the food, the milk in the bottle. You refused it. And so I didn't want you to die. So I hold you down because you're screaming so and refusing so. And Mom, your mother, gets the food down your throat. And I think that's why you've been so stubborn your whole life. Why you've done things your way. And I'm so grateful. My wife at the time lets me know how important it was that my father shares this with me. It really helps me understand, why I was so stubborn. I mean, I can relive it now, thanks to you, Dad. Not getting food when I want, and wanting food and being stubborn because not wanting to do it on your schedule. And so I'm kind of alone in there with no one to help me. And I realized in preparing for this evening, I had the power to just not be so stubborn and just take the food, drink the milk at the end of the 4th hour. I didn't then. If we're time traveling back, thank you. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I'm really hungry. So you wouldn't have had to hold me down. Well, the holding me down brought things that you might not have planned. Imagine as one of your earliest memories being held down with your arms stretched and someone pouring something down your throat that you don't want. Dad, you gave me early invitation to love someone who was like this and promised that eventually you could get off the cross and live happily ever after. So my parents, my Jewish parents, you, Dad, were giving me Christian education at the very beginning of my life, which has been very helpful, because I'm sure the members of the audience and on television have discovered that life is crucifixion and resurrection, winter and then spring. So this was actually, funny how life works, a gift, and now even more of a gift when I realize I can now, I don't have to refuse what I need, even if I don't like the way it is offered. Well, here's to taking what we need, however it comes. So I tell you, Dad, there's an old myth that you choose your parents. Hindu, Hasidic Jewish, and I would choose you again for just even the beginning of what you've shared. And my father, you say to him, Mike, shows you what a lousy father I was, that you'd make such a dumb choice like that again. Because it was a hard family. But Dad, I really would choose you again. And they even say, one philosopher who didn't like humanity very much, Schopenhauer, said that the reason parents are together is there's a spirit of the children saying, Evelyn and Charles, we want you to get together. Whether you like it or not, I, firstborn son, want to be born through you. So, Dad, if you have problems with your marriage to Mom, which are many, I and my brothers might have brought you together. This is how they met. They're the old. If you instead of Match.com, this might work for you. It's the old. They're ice skating in Manhattan, and my mother falls on the ice. The old falling on the ice trick, and she's lying on the ice, and this handsome fireman sees this beautiful woman on the ice. It works every time. In the old days, you drop a handkerchief. So much better to drop yourself. He reaches down, picks her up. Oh, thank you, kind sir. And my father, growing up in a candy store, remember, with a father who was never had there for him, my father says, I'd love to see you some more. What would you like to do? And my mother says, oh, I love bike riding. And so they make a date, their first date for the next week to bike ride. And my father does not know how to bike ride. When he was 11, he tells me this, he asked his father, Max, who works 7 days a week, 14 hours a day in the candy store, selling penny candies. And he says, Dad, I'd love some roller skates. And his father says, my grandfather, that's a childish thing. And my father remembers this. Seems like he wasn't allowed by his father to have a childhood, does not know how to ride a bike, and learns. And they go bike riding and start dating. They go to my mother's cousin Esther. They're sitting having a meal, and Esther says to her cousin, my mom, Evelyn, do you love Charles? And Evelyn says, sure. And Esther says, Charles, do you love Evelyn? My dad says, yes. And Esther says, great, you can get married. They walk out, and my mother is in shock. And she says, I'm not so sure about this. And my father says, honey, my father was very, very sensitive, you were, Dad, to what people thought of him. That's how he made it in the world. He says, honey, if we don't get married now, I won't marry you. And my mother married him. Lucky for me. I actually asked my father in that walk by Brooklyn Bridge, Dad, was I planned? And Dad, you were kind enough to say, well, we didn't plan you then, but we were planning on planning for you. So they get married. And they go, as people did in those days, to Niagara Falls. And the playwright and poet Oscar Wilde said sorry if we have a woman from Buffalo in the audience, but Oscar Wilde said, I'm just reporting, the only thing more disappointing than Niagara Falls is the honeymoons that people spent there. Because in those days, people didn't talk about sex. Women, my mother wouldn't know how to ask my father for what she would like. We've come a long way, baby. And my mother tells me how Oscar Wilde was right, how disappointing her honeymoon was. That's how I came into the world. I guess I don't think I want to imagine the moment of conception, but I think it is an unhappy one. My first memory of you, Dad, is I'm about 3 years old. Our name is Corn then. And they eventually chose my grandfather's name, Koransky, and changed our name to Koran. Actually, my mother did it when I was born, but didn't tell me, because she didn't like you, Dad, or your name. And I see corn growing. I'm 3 years old. And I say, Dad, the corn looks sick. It's not growing right. I don't get an answer, really. And that's my first memory. And I think I knew that something wasn't growing right. Certainly the family was challenged. When my my brother is born, their second child, you, Dad, according to Mom, come to the hospital and say, honey, I've just joined the Navy. World War II was going on. And left us. I think you preferred this, Dad. Left us to fight the Japanese. You got the kind of job in the Navy that was very fitting to you. You didn't kill anybody. You just you were on a minesweeper, taking mines out of the ocean so that ships wouldn't blow up. And you tell me there was even a gentleman's agreement between the Japanese, who had bombed Pearl Harbor, and the minesweepers. Because when the Japanese airplanes came over, they were there to bomb, I guess, aircraft carriers, but not to mess with minesweepers. And so my dad said, we didn't shoot at them, and they didn't shoot at us. Very typical of my father to have, even in war, really a kind job that wasn't hurting anyone. You, Dad, according to Mother, first write that you don't want to come home again. It was a hard family. My mother wasn't shy about saying how unhappy she was. We had what was called, I shared this before, the tragedy of the open mouth when we sat down to eat. My father would be hungry, feeling incomplete in the family, and start eating before my mother finished setting the table. And she'd say, Charlie, you're eating before I even sat down? I spent this afternoon cooking for us. Can't we begin together as a family? And it makes my father feel a little bit more empty. He doesn't respond to my mother verbally. She's too sharp for him. But he takes another drink. And which makes my mother angrier. And she starts complaining. Why can't we eat like a family? And of course, as a young child, this is hard to hear. And my father says, Evelyn, if you open your mouth one more time, I'm going to throw this at you. And my mother says, my brave mother, ah. And my father throws this. I will not do this to our audience. And my mother needs to be locked in the bathroom because she wants to come back and hit him. So that was eating. Quite a challenge between the force feeding and that kind of, to really learn to enjoy eating. There's a Hasidic story of a rabbi coming home on Sabbath. And his wife says, "Honey, there's no food at all for the Sabbath celebration." And the rabbi starts dancing around. I wish I could with all of this, all of these wires. And his wife says, "Honey, why are you dancing around?" And he says, "I'm celebrating the fact that I have a marvelous appetite." And so I've had to learn to do that. Maybe even telling you this now will help me. Because food is challenging with all this tension, the tragedy of the open mouth because neither of them can keep their mouth shut, the force feeding. I had to learn to just enjoy, and you're helping me now, enjoy my appetite. Just regardless of whatever's going on, to enjoy. Very Buddhist is to enjoy the journey towards something. So, but my father does come back because of the children. That's what he tells my mother. Maybe not the nicest thing to hear. We wouldn't quite do that today, I don't think. But he comes back from the war. And for this, I cannot say how grateful I am. Growing up with a single mother like my mother would have made life even maybe more unbearable. I remember playing cards with you, Dad. My father's a fireman, and I have more time with him than other children have with their parents, because my father works at night, he's home during the day. We play cards and other games. And when he goes out for a phone call, I remember cheating. I seem to always need to win. And he comes back and he knows I'm cheating. He tries to find out, but he can't quite do it. So I'm not, for whatever reason, many reasons, it was so painful. I'm a cheater. I can't quite just be with you, Dad. And we tried. We played catch together. And I always felt bad if I threw the ball and it was too hard for you to catch. So you really tried to be a loving father. I, in some ways, was, in some ways, trying too hard to be right for you, playing catch, and in some ways cheating. I remember once the boys in the second grade, Jimmy Lynch's gang, would chase me home, and I'd come home and say, "Dad, Jimmy Lynch's gang is chasing me." And he would say, "Come on, let's go outside." And we go outside, and Jimmy Lynch's was there with his gang, and my dad said, "Mike, pick out someone you'd like to fight." I picked Jimmy Lynch. And we fight on the porch, fists, with my father there as a referee. And I learned, thanks to you, Dad, to begin to fight, that I can fight for myself if people hurt me. I didn't always remember this. But I remember fighting Jimmy Lynch and winning. I had my mother's black gloves on, and his friend said, make him take off the gloves, which I did, and then it was more of an even fight. I didn't win, but I didn't lose. And thank you, Dad, for that. We would play. This is my gift. My dad, you'd play 1,000 games of chess with me. Really, 1,000 games. And it's very physical. You'd be sitting there, I'd be sitting here, and I could almost feel, because we're very competitive, father and son. We're almost hugging. It's a physical game, playing checkers and chess. And when we played checkers, when I was young, you took off a checker or two, so I could almost always win. And then when we turned to chess, you took off your queen. And then when I got better, you took off your castle. And unfortunately, I don't understand. You played these 1,000 games of chess with me, maybe 4 with my brother, who was 2 years younger than me. I don't know why. This is just, but I at least am grateful. He does not have the same gratitude. Sometimes when we play chess, I lose and I cry, or I try not to cry, and my mother says, "Charlie, Michael's crying again," and I try not to, but I have to win. And I can't ask this of you. Nowadays, maybe we could. It would have been wonderful for you to say, "Honey, it's okay if he cries." But my mother certainly was afraid that if boys cried, they wouldn't become men. And my father also did not know how to cry. With my younger brother, Len, I got out some of my frustrations with our family. As I was bigger, I would sit on when we wrestled, I'd sit on his arms with my head right above his head, and spit in his face. I think that helped him become a psychiatrist, so he may be grateful to me when I share this with him. He's a very good psychiatrist, head of the AMA in New Hampshire now. Maybe this contributed. But when I'm doing this, and you come home, Dad, Mom says, "Mikey's been spitting on Lenny again." And I run to my room, knowing I'm going to be hit by my dad. Not hard, more humiliating than painful. It wasn't really. And we had a rule. I don't know if I can do this with these wires, but maybe. Yes, maybe yes. We had an unwritten rule. If my father couldn't get my tush, he wouldn't hit me. So I'd squirm and put my legs around the foot of the bed, and we'd spend a very long time, it's really very intimate in a way, a very long time turning me over, and I'd go back and grab another leg of him, and eventually, Dad, you'd get me turned over and spank me. Again, you were a fireman, you were strong, but not very, very. It was more the humiliation than the pain. And then you'd walk out. And stubborn Mikey, maybe good for me, would say before you leave, "You bastard! You bastard!" Well, brave. And to show me that you need to respect your father, we would do the same thing again. And again, it would be just by about 20 minutes, a half hour, and Dad, you'd hit me a little bit less hard. And then, as you walked out, I said a little less quietly, "You bastard," but you could hear, and you come back and we do it. This is, in retrospect, this has a certain fun and games about it, like chess. Because I wasn't really hurt, but very humiliated, probably like the force feeding. And you leave a third time, and again, brave me, maybe, thin line between courage and stupidity. Brave me says, you bastard. And I could see you leaving and pretending not to hear me. And I think we both know you heard me, and you know that I am not fooled, but that you're pretending not to hear me. And you leave. You don't come back and do this again. And then I'm alone in my room, and you probably get a sense of my relationship with my family now. I'm just reporting to you, maybe good or bad, although it's nice reliving these and thinking about them. I stopped talking to you for 3 days. I'm a stubborn kid, fighting for myself. This might be good training. I don't recommend this, but I don't talk to you for 3 days. And then my mother comes in, who started it all by saying, Mikey's been spitting on Lenny, although of course I started it all. He has to protect my brother Len. And says, you're really hurting your father, Mikey. You're really hurting his feelings. Tell him you're sorry. Now this is tricky. To tell someone who hit me, being advised by someone who started it by telling my father about what happened, and I'm supposed to apologize? Now, as I told you, I feel for my father. I feel, one, that he left us. I don't want him to leave us again for 2 years, preferring to fight the Japanese. And feel for him if I throw the ball and he can't catch it because I don't throw it well enough. And kind of not quite with him because I'm cheating him in cards. But I do feel for him and need him so much, especially since he left us. And I go to the kitchen table and I say, I'm sorry, Dad, for hurting your feelings. Now, in revisiting this with you, this is a bit twisted. I mean, that might have been the last time I was genuinely compassionate for decades. Because being compassionate for you, Dad, it's hard to explain, but to be compassionate towards someone who hit me, saying, I'm sorry, I standing up for myself, which you taught me with Jimmy Lynch, and now I have to say, I'm sorry for saying I don't want to communicate with someone for a while who is hitting me and humiliating me. And so my heart, my guts, my compassion, I say, not consciously, if compassion brings this humiliation and this abdication of defending myself, I don't want it. It's too self-destroying. These are thoughts now. I'm not sure, but I certainly had trouble with compassion. I didn't feel for people, so I tried to be a good person. That's very, 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 very different. Again, telling this to you now, revisiting this with you, I think, what would we say now? What would I say with your wise advice? Is there a way I can say, Dad, I'm sorry I hurt you, and not feel that I'm abandoning myself? I can't wait to talk to this audience after the show is over and get your wise advice. But now I'm just reporting that I need to revisit this event and events like it to discover, oh my, can I find a way to be compassionate toward you without abdicating my own integrity? Can I be caring for myself before caring for you? And then out of my self-care, it'll be a truer compassion. So these were hard challenges, Dad. I think we had more trouble communicating as I grow older. You are kind. You say to me, we're walking on the beach by water again, just like I told you about walking by Brooklyn Bridge. And you say to me, I'm 16. Mike, I think we should talk about sex. And I say, oh, I know all about that, Dad. And then you give me one piece of advice anyway. I'm a little reluctant to share this with the women in the audience, but this is what and it was helpful. You say, Dad, Mike, just remember, you're never responsible for a woman's pleasure. Wow. And I thank you for letting me share these truths with you. That, alas, is very helpful. When I begin frightened to begin to try to have pleasure with women, and I begin at 30, we won't go into that why then for some of the challenges growing up. It is so freeing. I'm not defending this, but so freeing not to be responsible for a woman's pleasure and just say, okay, let's have a good time. Ask me for what you, maybe, I didn't say those things then, but now I would. Please ask for what you would like. So in some ways, Dad, thank you for that helpful advice, not complete. I understand why Mom's honeymoon and after was, as Oscar Wilde said, the only thing more disappointing than Niagara Falls is, and that was for at least Mom with you, Dad. I escaped to the University of Chicago. I'm very attracted in this lonely school. University of Chicago, they didn't ask you how you're feeling when you met them, any colleague or student or teacher. What have you been thinking lately? And if you weren't thinking anything interesting enough, that was the end of the conversation. So I was very lonely and extremely attracted as I was from force feeding. Oh my, on studying religion, oh my, there's a man who can feel great pain and be resurrected like spring from winter. And I go home during winter break and I tell you, Dad, I'm going to become a Catholic. I want to be baptized. And my father grew up in the candy store, a Jewish candy store in a Catholic neighborhood, and there were fights, and the Catholics didn't like the Jews. And he was devastated that his Jewish son, not that you ever taught me anything about Judaism then, wanted to be a Catholic. And you say, why don't you just be it without joining? You don't need a ceremony, just be true to what you believe. My father always wanted me to be free. You did, Dad. When I came home from school and said, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore, which you wanted me to be. I want to study philosophy. Poor boy from Brooklyn who was a fireman, philosophy. You did not like it, but you did not tell me not to do it. Most important to you, good American that you were, is you want your son to be free, your stubborn son to be free. You did not say, I really want you to be a lawyer, even though you did. You did not say, you said, okay, and study philosophy. When I want to be a Catholic, which really hurts you, do I know it would hurt you so much? Maybe. Not aware of that. You don't tell me not to do it. You go into your room, and for 7 days, it's like sitting Shiva, although we weren't religious. You do not come out of your room. You really care for me in ways I don't appreciate them. And at the end of the 7 days, there's a New Year's Eve celebration at our house, and a couple of other Jewish firemen are there. And they talk to me about it, and they're not horrified. They don't like it. They tell me to read a book, Jews, God, and History, one Uncle Abe. I call him Uncle Abe, just a friend of my father. But you still want me to be free and do what I think is best for me. And for that, I cannot thank you enough. And eventually, during the Vietnam War, when there were demonstrations and sit-ins, Dad, you visit me at the University of Chicago, which was built by John Rockefeller. John Rockefeller money. The biggest building on campus is Rockefeller Chapel. That was the rules. We go in to hear speakers against the war, and Dad, you come to this Christian service with me. Good for you. You've accepted that I am also a Christian. When I come back to visit in New Jersey, you invite me to your health club, and we sit. Pick this up. I'm afraid to pick that up. We sit naked in the locker room. And I see, it's hard not to look, I see, I think for the first time, your penis. Looks kind of small and friendly. We don't mention this. But I feel in this moment, one, grateful you made me. Painful as Niagara Falls might have been, you growing up in a candy store with a father that won't even let you be a child, roller skates are a childish thing. You made me. And I feel connected to you and grandfather who didn't let you do roses. I feel connected to you. And to all the fathers that have begotten their sons. And I felt twisted inside, not sure I was a man or a woman, or afraid to be gay, practice walking to be straight. And this helps me connect to being a man. Thank you so, so much. When you were dying, you call me on the phone, dying of pancreatic cancer, and you say, Mike, I'm a walking time bomb. Because the prognosis was 6 months to live. And I say, to my father, I would like to visit. And you don't want me to visit. My friend Wendy says, well, why don't you tell him that you're coming to Brooklyn and you just want to stop by. Then I'll let you come. And you said, okay. And then we planned to meet on Wednesday. We talk on the phone on Monday. I tell you, thanks, Dad, with your money, I've just bought a condo in my building for Mom. And your last words to me were, that's a load off your mind. You were thinking of me at the very end, a load off my mind that I had a condo for Mom. And I had planned to see you Wednesday, and you died. And at our funeral, your funeral, my brother tells this story and says, you, Dad, would do anything to avoid an intimate conversation, and died on Monday to not see me on Wednesday. And I remember at the funeral telling some of these stories about you. And you had left the fire department and started being a teacher at a community college teaching math and physics. And you started the first labor union for teachers in New Jersey and succeeded. You became a labor organizer. And I said at the funeral, which I say to you again, Dad, this is an old union song. And this is even true now, today. I dreamed I saw Charles Corn last night, alive as you and me. I said, "You're dead. You're 3 days dead." "I never died," said he. "I never died," said he. And I feel you still with us here, Dad. There's an old Jewish prayer, and the people here have helped us, I hope, be true, that when we remember people who die, the memories that we share when we remember them well are like prayers that lift them even higher into the heavens. And you all have helped me, and I hope my dad too, go higher into the heavens. One of your ways of being together, which I remember, was this is how my dad communicated. Being close was challenging to him as I got older. And I'd call up, this is how conversation went. I'd call up, "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Mike. Good to talk to you, Dad. I'm glad to get you." "Yes, it's been very nice talking, Mike. Keep in touch." And that was our conversation. Very, very brief. I once joked with my mother, who lived a few years after you died, Dad. "When you get to heaven, Mom, you'll meet Dad and he'll say, 'Hi, Evelyn, keep in touch.'" That was how they would communicate. Well, you once came to Newton with your new woman friend. You, Dad, were certainly unique in your time. You stayed married to Mom, and you lived with another woman in Brooklyn. Everyone's got their hobbies, and did it well. They both loved you. But you're visiting in Newton, and you say, "Call me up and say, 'I'll see you, Mike, Sunday.'" It was Saturday, and I said, "Great." And then you called me Sunday. This was hard for me. And you said, "I'm sorry, I can't visit. You had too many things to do with your new woman friend." And for the rest of your life, Dad, you told me, "Mike, I owe you a visit." And I repeatedly said, because I had learned not to, what a lesson this was, not to need a connection with you. To like it, to want it, but not to need. I had learned that to really want to connect to you was a way of getting hurt by me, because you did not want that close connection. So, I hope in a way that is working for you, Dad, now, Dad, that is working for me. We are keeping in touch. I remember when you died, I patted the coffin with my hand, keeping in touch with you in the coffin. And when we buried you in the ground on a beautiful day, no wind, and a leaf blew on your grave. And I wondered then and even now if in some ways, and it's so much of a gift to feel, Dan, that you are keeping in touch. And thanks to the people here, we will continue to keep in touch. Thank you, people, for coming, and thank you, Charles Corn, for, I imagine, being with us.